Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to wait a few minutes to let everybody log on. It's just before midday, so just hold the line and we'll get going very shortly. The numbers are going up nicely, so just a minute or two more. If you're just joining us, we're about to start in the next minute or so. We're just letting the attendees just sign in. We're nearly there. Another 30 seconds or so. Okay, it's 1 minute past 12, so we will start the presentation. This is a 30-minute presentation. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us on this webinar around leading successfully through the current crisis. My name is James Lay, and I'm joined with this session with fellow presenters Mark Curtis and Will Gibbs. Just so you're aware, the webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on the website. There is a chat box. Please do ask any questions along the way. We'll answer them outside of the webinar, so we'll contact you outside of this. And we've also got our email addresses showing at the end as well. So by all means, ask any questions to us, and we'll come back to you after the event. Okay, so Will, next slide, please. Today's agenda, we're just going to point out a personal resilience course that we've set up, and then we're going to go through the bulk of the webinar, the roadmap through this crisis, and asking where you appear on there and sharing some war stories that we're seeing. We'll be looking at the severity of the impact on different businesses. We're certainly seeing, again, different levels for different businesses. And then we'll be looking at 4 key attributes of a successful leader during the crisis, and we'll be summarizing at the end. As I say, we're targeting a 30-minute webinar for you. So, Will, next slide, please. We just want to highlight that Mark Curtis and I have recorded a series of videos on personal resilience. I think we see this as being a really key area at the moment. Naturally, the crisis has caused stresses and strains for all of us, and resilience is really important factor that we need to keep an eye on, both for ourselves and for our teams. And certainly as leaders, we need to be as resilient as we possibly can be. Those videos are going to be appearing very shortly on our website, free of charge, but also there are some further materials and some exercises around each of the videos. And if you'd like access to those, then you just need to let us know, and we'll sign you up to some online courses that we've got. That would be one of 2 free courses. Will, if you wanted to move on to the next slide. There are 2 free courses that we're offering, online courses on 18 different areas. This is available to anybody. Registration needs to be before the end of the month, but you have a 6-month window then to complete the courses. And they're on a wide spectrum of useful areas, such as increasing sales, improving profits, time management, personal resilience, we just talked about. So further details can be found on the website, or as always, just reach out to us. All we need to know is your name, your email address, and which of the 2 courses you'd like to sign up to, and we'll get you enrolled immediately. And as I say, it's available to anybody. So have a think about your teams, have a think about anybody you know, even family members that might benefit from doing those online courses. They tend to take around about half a day to complete. Okay, Will, next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight as well that there are lots of tools and videos on our COVID-19 hub on our website on some really relevant areas in this current crisis. So they're relatively short videos to look through, so they won't take up too much time, but there's some really valuable areas that we've been honing in on. Okay, we've lost Mark. Let's keep going. We are on to the next slide, which is roadmap through the crisis and where are you now. This is Mark's part. So Mark is, can we hear you, Mark?
Oh,
You're on. Right. Technical issue. Are you good? No. Okay. Right. Then we will continue without Mark, and he has prepared these slides, so I will do them instead.
hello.
James, is it worth us?
You're in. You're in.
Sorry, guys. Is it working?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go for
Apologies. Okay, so yeah, great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. What we've been looking at a roadmap for the crisis, and fundamentally, there's three areas. There's survive. So how do we make sure our business survives? How do we adapt to our new surroundings? And finally, how do we thrive as we start to come out of this? So different businesses will be in different places, and we'll all move through at different paces. So first of all, we have to survive. The first thing we have to do as a business is survive the first part of this crisis. So what kind of things can we do while we're in our survival mode? And there's four things that we think that we can work on. The first one is risk factors. So what are the things that could kill our business? If we can identify those, then we can do something about it. So we can start to identify the key risks within our businesses. Okay, so we can use scoring if we need, but the key thing is we're identifying them. The second thing is to move on to waste reduction. So where have we got unnecessary cost and time being spent in our business? So if we're going to survive, we need to be lean. So how do we ensure that our business is as lean as possible? And there's various different waste reduction tools that we can use. We certainly run through it with clients as well. We base it on the 7 wastes on the Toyota production system, but how do we make sure we're lean? The third thing is we need to be good at problem solving at this point in time. And we need to do it quickly. We can't spend days and days trying to come up with the decisions. So we need some rapid problem solving. And for this, we use a 4-step process. The first step is to mind map it out, so brainstorm out the issue. Second thing is to then pick out the key areas from that mind map. Once we know what the key areas are, we can then drive into those to work out the details and the specific actions that we need to take. And finally, we just turn it into a very short 1-page plan. But we don't want to spend too long on this because it's a rapid problem solving process. We need to be making decisions and coming up with solutions to those potential problems that we're facing. And the final and fourth part of the survive phase for me is about workforce planning. We have the furlough scheme. So who are the people in our businesses? What skills do they have? So we could start to think about a skills matrix for our people if we don't have it. Who are the multifunctional people who can deliver various things to our clients and customers? How many people do we need? How likely are they to be busy? So we can actually start to make sure we've got enough people and the right people. So our workforce planning is really important at this point in time. So once we've done those sort of things, we know that we can survive as a business. So then we can start to move on to, well, okay, how do we adapt? Things have changed, things are not the same, and they might not be for a while, if ever. So how do we adapt our business to deal with this? So for this area, I think there's 3 things that I would really encourage businesses to work on. The first one is a strategic SWOT. Now, we've all probably done SWOT analysis in the past, and we don't necessarily use it. It sits at the back of a business plan. This is about how we use it to drive some specific actions. Okay, so once we've put our SWOT quadrant together, there's then 4 questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first one is, how do we use our strengths to commercialize our opportunities which are available to us? The second thing is, how do we use our strengths to remove the threats which could be coming our way? The third thing is, how do we make sure that our weaknesses don't spoil the opportunities that we have? And fourth and finally, which is just as important, how do we ensure that our weaknesses and our threats don't combine to cause us what could become an existential problem and threat to our business? So we've talked about change there. What changes can we make? The second point I think we could look at is, what are the barriers to change? Most businesses on a survey which was carried out have about a 30% probability of driving change successfully through on a project. So what are the barriers that could cause us a problem to put that change through? And we operate a change success model which identifies the key areas that we can focus into as a business. And the third thing is product surround, and by this it's how do we deliver what our customers really want? So the 20% in the middle is the core of what we do, but the 80% surround is what the customers really value. So now's a really great time to reassess what is it that our customers and our clients really value about what we deliver as a product or a service, and how do we ensure that we get that message across and we really deliver it to them. So then we move on to the third phase, which is the thrive phase. So once things start to return, the markets start to come back, how do we make and take actually advantage of this? So there's 3 things that, again, I would look at here. The first one is growth strategy. So how are we going to grow? How are we going to grow through this and take advantage of the markets which are coming back to us? And we would look at 4 things here. We look at market penetration. So how do we sell existing product and service into existing markets? Secondly, market expansion. How do we sell existing products into new markets? Thirdly, product expansion. How do we sell new products into existing markets? And finally, diversification. And they get tougher as you go down that list. So what is our growth strategy? How are we going to grow? Secondly, cash flow. When we grow, we've all seen it coming out of previous recessions. Growth can be a real threat time for businesses as well, because as we grow, we need more working capital. So how do we ensure our cash flow is going to support the growth strategies that we're putting in place? So they need to be aligned. And thirdly, we've talked about workforce planning in the survive stage. We also need to do it for the thrive stage. How do we make sure that we've got the right people in our businesses to deliver that growth? And it might be a journey that we have to start now. It might be 6 months before we get to thrive. But if you say in our industry, where if we wanted to recruit a high-level tax advisor, for example, they could have a 6-month restrictive covenant. So we need to start planning for that early. So just thinking about our workforce that we're going to need to deliver that. Now on this slide, we've very much looked at the survive, adapt, thrive process as a linear straight line process, but I think in reality that's highly unlikely to actually map out that way. And what we're more likely to see is recycling between the stages, as potentially the government have to change the way we operate our business, maybe some further restrictions coming through. But I think the key thing is having some tools and thought processes on how we can quickly adapt and change if we find that we're moving maybe between the phases at different points in time. So it's all about having some preparedness, it's having the tools, it's having the techniques to allow us to make those decisions as businesses. So at this point, Will, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Probably a bit smoother than our last handover, I hope.
I've got a green light, which is positive now.
So we're now going to look at the attributes of successful leaders during a crisis. Now, we've identified and are going to talk about 4. They are adaptability, agility, resilience, and scenario planning. I'm going to cover the first 2 because they're quite similar. They're operational based and to do with responding to change. Then I'll pass back to James and Mark to go through resilience and scenario planning. So why have we chosen adaptability and agility as 2 of the attributes to talk about? Well, I suppose as we tiptoe our way out of lockdown at the moment, the sort of ongoing situation and what happened next doesn't appear to be getting any clearer for a lot of businesses and a lot of individuals. As a result, the scenario planning and our strategic planning is getting harder. What's really important at the moment as a leader and as a team is that we can be adaptable and agile. So moving on to adaptability, there's a great quote here from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. If we replace species with business, this quote probably becomes more relevant today than it has ever been. We know from the businesses we've spoken to that it's not necessarily the largest business that's doing the best at the moment. It's not necessarily the one that's providing the most intelligent, cutting-edge service. It's the one that can adapt to the changes that we have in our business environment that is surviving the best. So how do we improve our adaptability or even test our adaptability? There's a great TED talk here from Natalie Fratto. We'll send the link round after the presentation today. It's worth a watch. I think it's about 6.5 minutes long. But she covers through her 3 ways to improve your adaptability. Now, these 3 are asking yourself what-if questions, unlearning, and exploration via exploitation. So what-if questions are really quick-fire, almost scenario planning. They're designed to get you thinking about, if presented with a certain change, how would you respond? So, for example, what if our biggest supplier is no longer able to supply to us as we move out of lockdown? The point is not to run through in your mind and have a detailed plan of everything that you would do in this scenario. It's just purely to get the thought process going. So what if our biggest supplier is unable to supply to us? What other suppliers could we use? Perhaps we can draft up a quick list of them or something like that. Then when we get to the change in the scenario in the future, we already have our first thought process and our first action points ready to go through. Most business leaders, and I'm sure most of you on the call will be doing this already, maybe not necessarily under this what if sort of way of doing it, but you'll be asking yourself these questions. But it's really important at the moment to take that moment to really think about what other questions and scenarios could come up to you. The second way to improve your adaptability that Natalie talks through is about unlearning. We've probably, as business leaders, spent a long time trying to drill into our team the correct way of doing something, how we've always done it, how the correct and most efficient process is. As we move out of lockdown and the business environment has changed quite considerably, it's likely that this process might not be the best way to do it anymore. We're going to have to adapt in some way. As a result, the way that we've currently been doing things might not necessarily be the best way to do it going forwards. And as a result, as a leader, we're going to need to get our team to unlearn what we've just spent ages drilling into them in order to move on to the new way, the new norm. This is a really hard skill. Natalie uses an example in her talk of the backwards brain bike, which is a bicycle that was made by an American engineer that when you steer left, it turned right. It's a bit of a novel example, but I suppose it shows how you'd have to reprogram your brain to something that you already think you knew how to do, but to improve the process. The third point to improve your adaptability is to look at the difference between exploration and exploitation. At some point, and some businesses will already be there, on your path through, if you're already at the thrive stage, you're going to reach a point where one of your products or your services is performing well. When you reach this point, it's in every business's interest to really hit the exploitation, really drill into it. If you use the example of an oil company, when they dig and find an oil well, at that point then their primary focus is to get as much of the oil out as they can, really milk what they can out of it. However, at some point, the oil is going to run out. And we're going to find that with a constantly changing business environment at the moment, your products and services that perhaps are more successful now or going to be more successful in the next couple of weeks might not be in the future. As a result, we need to keep on exploring, keep on pushing to find our new oil well, or how we adapt our product or service, how we continue to improve and keep the consumer demand. This moves us on quite nicely to agility. So in 2015, McKinsey did an article about agility and identified 2 key elements to an agile business and leader. It's easier to look at this from a business perspective and then bring it back to being a leader. So we go through, they used an example of a smartphone. So they said that the stable backbone of a smartphone is its ability to make calls. The dynamic capability is then the apps and all the different functions that you can put on a modern day smartphone. Now they said to be agile, you need to look at both of these elements and you need to look at them together and separately. At the moment, with a lot of businesses shut down or slowly trying to reopen now, it's quite common that businesses are focusing on their stable backbone. What is their bread and butter business? Now this obviously makes sense, but there's a good point to note that with everything changing, the dynamic capability is what's likely to move you through the adapt phase and into the thrive phase. So what dynamic capabilities do you need to build on at present through the crisis, and how is your backbone doing? And it's important to not just focus on one or the other. We've had a few businesses that perhaps have had to close and their backbone is no longer performing for them at the moment. But it doesn't mean that they need to panic and completely disregard everything they do and go off on an entirely new side venture. You've got to use your stable backbone and your dynamic capability in unison. So that was the first two attributes of a successful leader. I'll now pass on to James, who will run through resilience.
Excellent, thanks, Will. So resilience. What is resilience? We've written there bouncing back from adversity, or I think another way of looking at it good explanation would be Ian Dowie, the football manager and player, referred to it as bounce back ability, which I think is just as accurate. The reality is that we're all challenged with events that we perceive to be bad, and COVID-19, I'm sure, is no different. The key to success is going to be how quickly we bounce back from this as an economy, as businesses, as people, and how quickly we pick ourselves up and dust ourselves down. So that we see, which is why we've done the course recently on personal resilience, we see it as really crucial. And it's just as crucial for our leaders who are leading our teams. We've got to be that resilient leader. And so we've got three tips on there. Controlling your behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs. I think the beliefs bit is the really interesting area, and challenging your existing beliefs. Are they self-limiting? And if they are, then you can reprogram them. And I'm sure many of you will have used or heard of affirmations. So if you're suffering from confidence, for instance, then you might say to yourself, I'm a confident person. I'm a confident person. And there's lots of evidence to suggest that works. But a tip around that would be to try and link that affirmation with emotion, and you will make that affirmation much more powerful. So in order to do that, think of a time, if we're talking about confidence, think of a time that you're really confident, and then step back into that moment and see what you saw, hear what you heard, and feel what you felt at that point. And if you can bring those emotions along with the affirmation and you repeat it regularly, then you can start reprogramming the mind. The subconscious will listen into those new beliefs, and you can become a more confident person, or whatever it may be. So keep a careful watch on your beliefs. Improving your problem-solving skills. I think that lots of anxiety is driven by the fear of not being able to solve problems that may appear either now or in the future. And so developing your problem-solving skills as a leader is crucial. And we've got the 4-step problem-solving video on our website. So that's what Mark was talking about earlier, where we mind map problems, we Pareto them down into the key areas. We'll then drive actions from a force field, and we'll summarize it all in a one-page plan. So take a look at that, but it's not always possible to, or you've not always got the time to go through that sort of process. And sometimes you've got to fall back on experience and intuition. And I think it's just always keeping an eye on whether you're taking action. Are you procrastinating on an issue? Have you got all the information you need to take the decision, but you're preventing yourself from doing it? Or are you incubating a solution? And sometimes you do need a little bit of time, night sleep, etc., just to think that problem through. But as a leader, problem solving is absolutely critical. That's effectively all we're ever doing. So improving those skills is something to focus in on. Finally, managing your strong feelings, and a tip to concentrate on there is, do you verbalize the negative? So if you say something negative, it's likely to be 40 to 70 times more powerful than thinking something positive. So what are you verbalizing? And what I'd encourage certainly my team and others to do is to be mindful of things that we say, both to ourselves, because our subconscious is listening in, but also to our team members. If we're verbalizing negative thoughts, then we're making them 40 to 70 times more powerful. And if you've got positive thoughts, then say them. To balance that out. And one thing I've been doing in the last 10 days is a mental challenge. So it's 10 consecutive days, whereby if there's something that is negative that appears, I don't allow myself to dwell on it for more than 2 minutes. I reframe it and I move on. And if I find that I'm focusing on it for too long, for more than 2 minutes, then the 10-day challenge goes back down to day one again, and off you go again. And that's quite a useful challenge to go through, just to try and get some focus on and watch your thought processes and identify what's positive and what's negative. And of course, resilience, you know, is thought processes, but it is just as much physiological things. So have a think about, you know, are you staying hydrated? You know, are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising sufficiently? Are you minding your diet in lockdown? You know, are you staying connected to people, your team, your family, etc.? Think about mindfulness techniques, relaxation techniques, etc. So that all has a key part to play, and I think I would say probably the most critical of the 4 attributes, which is this resilience. So, Mark, number 4.
Thanks, James. So the fourth one is scenario planning, and I think for leaders at the moment, the ability to scenario plan and drive change is just absolutely key. The one thing none of us can afford to do at the moment is just get caught flat-footed. So how do we best do that? Well, we look at it from our business advisory angle. Everything we do is based on a very simple underlying process, which is now, where, and how. So everything we do, we look at where are we now, where are we trying to get to, and then how are we actually going to deliver that? And it's no different in scenario planning either. The only thing we might want to do is, once we know where we are, the where could be affected by the severity of what we're going through. So we might want to think about low, medium, and high severity options as well, which gives us more flexibility into our plan, because we can then start thinking about how we can actually deliver upon that to have something which is still viable. So almost, what is our minimal viable product? What is it that we need to get by still? However, I think when we're looking at scenario planning, it doesn't have to be longer term business planning at this point. This could be a daily process that we run through as leaders. And just from a personal example, I have a morning call with my senior manager in my team, and we literally have 30 minutes where we kind of go, okay, what's going to kill us today? Is there anything out there which is an existential threat to what we're doing today? What are the key things that have happened overnight from the government and from the world? Is there anything we need to adapt to and be really ready for today that we need to brief our team on? So we're going through this process, and on the screen there, you'll see we're using a flip chart. I think almost the time at the moment, flip charts, we just don't need them. We need some real rapid problem solving, as we talked about earlier. And this is very much about just having a process to follow, even if it's on a daily basis, which gets us to a position where we're taking the right decisions at the right time. So scenario planning is just absolutely key at the moment. And as you can see on the screen there, it says, how are you adapting your plan and how frequently? And I think that's the key at the moment. I think, you know, we can't let the grass grow under our feet at the moment. This has got to be something that we're looking at on as a daily basis, even if it's just a 5-10 minute kind of run through. We've got to be revisiting our plans on literally a daily basis at the moment. So that's scenario planning, and as I say, I think it's absolutely critical for us as leaders at the moment to make sure that that's just something we're working on very frequently at the moment. James, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Excellent. So just summarizing then this webinar, have a think about those 2 free courses. You know, think about how you might be able to make use of them, or people you know might be able to make use of them. They are no obligation, just get in contact with us, details on the website, but just email Mark or Will or I, and we'll get you onto those courses. The deadline for registration is the end of May. On the survive, adapt, thrive insight, you know, on the survive, think about what will kill us. Look ahead at maybe the next sort of 2, 3, 4 months, and try and mitigate those risks. Question whether you're running lean. That's not just looking at costs, that's looking at processes as well within your business. If you're in the adapt stage, then Mark talked about the strategic SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and trying to leverage those. And also thinking about your products around. So how can you widen your current service offering? And the thrive stage, well, that was heavily backed by cash flow and work flow planning. So both of those are really important, and also looking at your 4 growth options, those sort of new and recurring markets and products that that you can look at. Then we looked at the 4 attributes of a successful leader and adaptability. So asking those what if questions, you know, using your imagination to see what may appear. unlearning things that you currently understand and trying to seek improvement, and that exploitation versus exploration. Are you digging your new oil wells for the future? The agility, we looked at the stable backbone versus the dynamic capability, and then resilience. What's your beliefs, and think about building emotion into any affirmations that you're playing for yourself or for others. Improve your problem-solving skills. That will reduce anxiety, and manage your strong feelings. Don't verbalize negative thoughts. Then we looked at scenario planning and looking at that now, where, how planning process. So that's in a summary of the material there. Have a think about anything that leaps out at you. What top strategy may be in that material that you can take away and use in your business as a leader. And it's really important to drive some action through. As Stephen Covey of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People once said, to learn and not to do is not to learn at all. So if you've learned anything new in there, then please, we'd encourage you to apply it going forwards. Move on to the last slide. Thank you very much, Will. Thank you very much for attending. It is now 12:30, so it is 30 minutes as promised. If you've got any questions, then please either fill it into the chat box, we'll come back to you, or drop an email to myself, Mark, or Will, and we'll be very happy to come back to you. And we'll be planning, we're planning a webinar like this again in early June, but we welcome any feedback from anybody along the way. So we hope you found this helpful. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to next month.